On this Friday night, the clock is ticking to yet another tariff deadline. With hours left for Canada and the U.S. to finalize the trade deal, Canadian businesses grow more anxious.
Even if we get to Saturday, how do we know it's going to hold?
New strategies, what Montreal police will soon do to be more transparent, trying to rebuild public trust. The Ice Dart, what this made-in-Canada drone can do that would send other drones crashing. And how it can aid research. And between a rock and a hard place.
The person got a little bit lost, perhaps, and they were maybe curious.
The tight rescue in an Alberta cave using new Canadian technology.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Colleen Christie.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Negotiations in Washington between Canada and the U.S. are going down to the wire to seal a trade deal with just a few hours left before President Donald Trump says he'll slap 50% tariffs on Canadian products. And before boarding Air Force One today, Trump said the U.S. should be able to reach a deal with Canada. Details of what may end up in the agreement are trickling out ahead of the midnight Eastern deadline. They include softened levies from the White House, but they won't be enough to help some of Canada's most important industries. That's on top of potential concessions drawing scrutiny about the federal government's strategy. MacKenzie Gray has his eyes on the latest developments tonight.
The longest trade talks yet still haven't resulted in a deal just hours before new tariffs are set to come into place.
We have more work to do. We're going to continue working up until the last minute. Our job is not finished.
The president more bullish than the Canadian side that an agreement will actually happen.
The deal with Canada is moving along, and we should be able to have a deal with Canada.
Trump's optimism not shared by his Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, who sources tell Global News became involved in the talks on Wednesday, making it clear he doesn't think the current deal on offer is good enough for the U.S. Lutnick was also involved in the Gordie Howe Bridge renegotiation and the boss of Maine U.S. trade czar Jamieson Greer. The pair reportedly have a rocky relationship. Last-second drama leading Dominic LeBlanc's office to tell the Prime Minister's Advisory Council, our strength in the hours to come will rest on discipline, focus, and a United Team Canada approach, according to an email obtained by Global News. That approach called into question on Thursday.
Everything I said yesterday stands.
Now is the time to fight Donald Trump, according to Wab Kinew, and call his bluff. But he seemed to try and smooth things over after criticizing Mark Carney's strategy.
We have an excellent relationship with the Prime Minister, with the federal government.
The Prime Minister's request to put booze back on the shelf and end bans on U.S. companies getting provincial contracts begrudgingly accepted by Kinew, but needs to be done by each province or there's no deal. So far, no word from Ontario's Doug Ford if he's on board. Retaliatory Canadian auto tariffs, changing dairy quotas, and killing the Online News Act. Other concessions made by Carney, sources have told Global News, details that have the Conservatives concerned.
Remember, he said that his entire election campaign was about elbows up, don't accept a bad deal. Well, one-sided tariffs on Canadian industry would be a bad deal.
As it stands now, sources have told Global News, Canada will see a reduction in steel and aluminum tariffs from 50 to 25%, a level the steel industry has said won't actually provide meaningful relief. Auto tariffs set to go to 15%, but apply to Canadian-made cars and parts, a level multiple auto industry insiders have told the Carney government will lead to plant closures. Any deal seemingly formalizing U.S. tariffs on Canada, something fought against for decades.
I don't understand why today, why tonight, why tomorrow we accepted a deal, if in fact what I'm hearing is true.
If there is a deal, expect the Prime Minister to try and sell it as the best possible one for Canada, Colleen, a line that was poorly received by some business leaders when delivered by a senior Canadian government official in a rare briefing on how the talks are going.
MacKenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thanks, Mac. It's an anxious evening for Canadians whose livelihoods depend on the sectors that are on the table in the ongoing trade talks. As Sarah McDonald reports, a long-term tariff of any amount could sink many businesses.
Canada's automotive sector is buckling up and bracing for impact. After weathering whopping 25% tariffs and billions of dollars in losses over the past year and a half, any new tax would deliver a devastating blow.
For every percentage point, that is about $100 million a year at an operating automotive plant.
Which means even with a penalty reduction on the table in trade talks, Canadian plants would still be staring down 9-figure losses on an annual basis.
A 15.5% or effective 7.5% tariff rate is a big hill to climb.
Longtime former policy advisor Greg Mordew says any tariff for any sustained amount of time could ultimately mean that automakers just can't carry the cost of production.
What is effectively being handed to the Canadian assembly industry is an expectation that the automakers will pay for assembly labor twice. And they don't want to do that.
With American booze already back in stock in some provinces, that trade-off is facing stiff pushback in BC.
If I had my way, I'd say stick it in the back corner, and customers who want to purchase them can.
Industry advocates urging the province to protect shelf space for homegrown suppliers.
There are 8 individual wineries in California that individually produce more wine than the entire Canadian wine industry. So this is a David and Goliath situation. We're a small industry.
Any relief for forestry almost certainly won't be meaningful enough to resuscitate the softwood lumber sector, long struggling and still stuck with sky-high duties.
That industry has lost 15,000 jobs. Very little has changed for forestry, which is a big disappointing item for us.
With the clock on a long-standing trade dispute ticking down to midnight.
Even if we get to Saturday, how do we know it's going to hold?
And limited long-term security, even if a deal is reached. Sarah McDonald, Global News, Vancouver.
All right, ma'am.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance serving up a healthy dose of criticism of Mark Carney. In audio obtained by the Canadian press at a fundraiser in New York Wednesday night, he described Carney as a very sweet guy, but said he's trying to out-tough President Trump. Vance also credited longtime friend and Conservative MP Jamil Jivani as an effective advocate for Canada. Edmonton's mayor says he's concerned about the rise in violent incidents against the Sikh community after the most recent incident today when a man entered a temple and stabbed 2 people during morning prayers. Witnesses say the man came in and tried to destroy scriptures which are considered sacred. 2 men were stabbed when they confronted him. They were both treated for minor injuries. Police say they're working to determine if the incident was hate motivated. The city's mayor says incidents like this are becoming too common.
This is not an isolated incident, especially given the rise of anti-Sikh hate in Alberta. Our community and city is built on the values of diversity and inclusion.
Police say charges are pending against a 27-year-old man who has a significant history of violent offenses. RCMP say they've arrested a Montreal youth who was allegedly using AI to potentially plot an attack on a school. The youth's identity is not being released due to provisions under the Youth Criminal Justice Act. He was arrested this morning after RCMP launched an investigation a few weeks ago over intelligence shared by the FBI. Mounties say he was also posting threatening messages on social media targeting various groups. Charges have not been laid yet as the investigation continues. Police in Montreal are being given new powers and will soon be wearing body cameras as part of changes announced by the city today. The move follows 2 high-profile incidents in which police were both the alleged victims and alleged abusers. While officials say the cameras will provide accountability, some say they will do little to change behavior. Phil Carpenter reports.
3,500 Montreal police officers could start getting body cameras in less than 2 years. City officials made the announcement Friday morning, arguing that the move will help build public trust.
It is one tool that we need in terms of transparency of interactions.
On top of that, 600 patrol vehicles will have cameras installed to automatically read license plates. This comes after years of debate about the usefulness of the devices. In 2019, the city and police questioned their effectiveness after a 2017 pilot project.
Hundreds of millions of dollars over the coming decades, and that you'd only end up with fragmentary video evidence.
Now, in the wake of racism allegations launched against police officers at a Montreal North station, misogynistic verbal attacks against a female police officer this spring, and a coroner's recommendation earlier this week, the city is budgeting $40 million to deploy the cameras gradually. Officials also want to adopt a bylaw to protect city employees from insults.
The idea is not to stop criticism, but it's to give us a tool that will allow our employees to be protected.
As for the body camera deployment, some rights advocates say it's about time.
Years ago, we formed a coalition to point out that Quebec's an anomaly. It's about the only place in North America where body cameras are not standard police issue.
But law enforcement watchers warn that footage from police body cameras doesn't improve police behavior.
Research has shown over the last 15 years that it doesn't change police conduct at all. It doesn't reduce acts of police violence. It doesn't reduce police racial profiling.
Some point to the murder of George Floyd as one example. The city concedes that body cameras aren't a magic bullet and that other tools like training are needed.
When you bring all those tools together and you add the camera, for us, we think it's going to be a different conclusion eventually.
Something rights groups are keen to watch for. Phil Carpenter, Global News, Montreal.
I literally never imagined that such a beautiful, visible, sparkly, and inspirational monument would stand here for us.
An historic day, decades in the making for Canada's 2S LGBTQI+ community. A national monument called Thunderhead was unveiled in Ottawa. It honors the 9,000 Canadians systematically harassed and fired from the military, RCMP, and public service for their sexual orientation or gender identity from the 1950s to the 1990s. The monument is a work of art. As Eric Sorensen tells us, its shape and reflective surface are to remind us of a dark chapter in our history and inspire hope for the future.
The monument is a thunderhead, power reflecting the turmoil and the hope of the 2S LGBTQI+ community, a new national symbol of what so many went through.
It even says on my records, not advantageously employable due to homosexuality.
35 years ago, Michelle Douglas was fired from the military for being a lesbian. From the 1950s to the 90s, National Defense, the RCMP, and the Federal Public Service weeded out homosexuals seen as vulnerable to enemies of the state.
They wanted to know how, who, when, where.
The courage of people like Darrell Wood bringing their story to Parliament Hill. Through the years, one after another, like Sharp Doppler, opened up.
And this commander looked at him and said, "Because she's a goddamn dyke and I want her out."
All those long ago protests, and finally,
we are sorry.
A government apology. A class action lawsuit provided funding, and a national monument was imagined.
Laurie started drawing clouds.
In Winnipeg, Shauna Dempsey and Laurie Millen conceived of a thunderhead, exploding old prejudices.
By making a monument, creating a physical thing, it's irrefutable.
It's 11 meters high, an interior with mirrored tiles, reflective in more ways than one. It's been a long fight for Michelle Douglas, who helped spearhead the effort.
This is something that really happened in Canadian history, and not enough people know about it.
On Friday, Douglas and others officially opened Thunderhead, a public space recognizing the discrimination faced by the queer and trans communities. Todd Ross was once in the Navy. At 19, he was interrogated and forced out for his sexuality. On this day, he thought about the struggle for so many.
The suffering as a result of the purge is remembered. Thank you for your service.
Service from those who did speak out, those who could not, and those who passed away before this monument took its proper place in the nation's capital. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Neutrogena breaks its silence. Coming up, how the company is responding to the outrage over past claims by late actor Hayden Panettiere.
That is a tornado, and oh my God, it is spinning around.
A rare sight in New York's Long Island, a tornado touching down in the coastal village of Atlantic Beach. Powerful thunderstorms rolled through the region last night, flooding parts of New York City and New Jersey. As the U.S. war with Iran drags on, the Trump administration is now threatening economic retaliation against its own allies should they have any dealings with the Islamic Republic. The new warning comes as part of an announcement by the U.S. Treasury Secretary that the U.S. will soon reveal what's billed as the strongest economic action against Iran in history. Candace Cole reports.
It is a 1-2 punch. We have the blockade, and we are going to have the toughest sanctions in history.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent promising historic economic action against Iran, while also threatening U.S. allies, saying, quote, "You're either with us or against us," during an appearance on CNBC Thursday.
You want this murderous regime to end, and if you insist on doing business with them, then the U.S. Treasury and the U.S. government they will put its full might and force toward enforcing against you.
The hardline stance comes after U.S. President Donald Trump, who is struggling to find an off-ramp to the war, announced economic warfare of an unprecedented scale against Iran, threatening the most crushing economic operation ever taken against any country, and extending that threat to any country that provides any type of lifeline to Iran with the same consequences. Iran's foreign minister calling Trump's economic D-Day a diversion from America's own financial crisis as the U.S. grapples with $40 trillion in national debt. China, which is not a U.S. ally and gets 80% of its oil from Iran, says Trump's economic threats do not, quote, fit the interests of any party, urging de-escalation and a return to diplomatic talks. When asked this week about resuming talks with Iran, Trump responded,
but maybe at some point. Look, it's very simple. They have to get rid of no nuclear weapons.
Negotiations between the two broke down in early July after both sides carried out a series of missile strikes, violating the terms of the Memorandum of Understanding signed by the U.S. and Iran in June. The 60-day window for Washington to reach a peace deal with Tehran also expired this week. Besant is set to make an announcement Monday detailing what those economic sanctions against Iran will be. Candace Cole, Global News, Washington.
Skincare company Neutrogena is addressing calls for a boycott of its products over allegations made by actor Hayden Panettiere, who died earlier this week. Panettiere was Neutrogena's global brand ambassador from 2005 to 2015. In a recent podcast, she said the company ended their partnership over her public comments about struggling with postpartum depression. On social media, the company now acknowledges it made her feel unsupported during a very difficult time. It also said it will make significant investments to support women with postpartum depression. Panettiere died last Sunday at 36. Ahead, the Canadian-made drones designed for the Arctic and inspired by cats. The Arctic is one of the most hostile places on Earth to send a drone. Ice, wind, and steep terrain can make landing extremely difficult. But a Canadian-made drone is solving those problems, taking a cue from a stealthy animal. Turia Isri explains.
Welcome to the Arctic. Sort of. It's a recreation of it in the dead of summer. This is not a glacier in the far north, but a sheet of plywood.
1, 2, 3.
The Quebec backyard serves as a training ground for the kind of slippery terrain this Canadian-made drone is built to overcome.
There's places that are fully inaccessible to humans or much too risky.
The Ice Dart can land there. The brainchild of University of Sherbrooke engineering and robotics researcher Isaac Tunney.
If you can just land the drone on the iceberg, then you can follow its path in the water, its drifting motion.
The device can grip rugged surfaces that would send a conventional drone crashing. The Ice Dart takes its cues from one of nature's best landers.
The cat claws inspiration came from literally thinking about cats and how they can deploy and retract their claws on command when needed.
Tunney and his team put the technology to the test in Iceland, sinking its claws into icebergs riddled with crevices and staying perched above.
If it can only hover, then it's limited by its flight time, but if it can land, it can do much longer missions.
That could make it easier to monitor a changing Arctic.
As we finally come to acknowledge the threats that we face in the Arctic region, and we look at the geography, we look at the climate, we are looking for other means that go beyond what traditionally we have utilized.
The high-tech research is happening in a relatively humble workshop and home office.
My main goal would be to have that type of technology to be able to land anywhere in the world.
Helping us better understand vast landscapes and proving that sometimes the best way to explore is to stay in one place. Turia Isri, Global News, Montreal.
A man stuck in a cave in Alberta, how rescuers were able to communicate with him through solid rock. Next.
It's the place to be in the morning. Watch The Morning Show with Carolyn MacKenzie and Jeff MacArthur, weekdays on Global.
Imagine being trapped for hours in a tight squeeze inside a cave, unable to move. Well, that was the case for a man in Canmore, Alberta earlier this month. A situation that could have cost him his life were it not for the technology developed by search and rescue volunteers. Heather Yurex West explains.
Rat's Nest Cave beneath Canmore's Grotto Mountain is an adventure that draws tourists from all around the globe. Seen here in this Travel Alberta promotional video, the cave features some tight squeezes, but some areas are so tiny, tourists are advised to stay away.
It's an extremely rare event. In this case, it was just the person got a little bit lost perhaps, or maybe curious with the very tight section, but that tight section is not part of any of the tours.
13 cave rescuers and 10 firefighters responded to the August 15th call for help after a man became stuck in a part of the cave known as psych squeeze.
In a cave, most forms of communication don't work. They can't penetrate through the rock, and travel is very slow and difficult as well. So when we're sending in a team of rescuers into the cave, we might lose communication with them for hours and hours.
But for this rescue, the BC Alberta team had the assistance of some brand new, locally developed tech.
I'm an amateur radio operator, and so I know what's going on in the amateur radio world. And I was thinking we should be able to apply this and use it with the cave radios.
In development since 2023, this digital cave radio system allows crews to communicate via text message. This rescue marking the first time the system was deployed in an actual cave rescue event.
It's pretty amazing having that instantaneous communication up and down from the surface to the cave.
After 12 hours in the cave, the man was finally freed after firefighters carefully removed rock around him. He was able to walk out of the cave without injury. A gratifying outcome for the volunteers who've spent years developing and testing this tech that's now proven it can save a life. Heather Yurex West, Global News, Calgary.
And that is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Colleen Christie. Tonight's Your Canada is this 3-week-old pygmy hippo calf at the Toronto Zoo who today was given the name Maple. The zoo says the name represents Canada's resiliency, and Maple is, quote, every bit as sweet, spirited and sassy as her name suggests. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Have a good night.